Hello everyone, my name is Lisa and I'm the Viet vegan because I'm Viet and I'm vegan, and today I'm going to show you how I make these face masks in a sewing tutorial, sort of. It's going to be like a how I learned how to sew in my machine and then sewing tutorial because I am a very beginner sewer. I've been making these face masks for friends, family, and some local people. I actually learned how to make these face masks from another YouTuber named Millie and Chloe, and so she had like this tutorial that was actually very helpful. Just as a disclaimer, these are not medical grade masks. They're basically just masks to cover your face to help reduce the spread from you to other people because it's going to be inside the mask. But if anything, it's just so that you stop touching your face. It's not gonna really 100% guarantee protect you from anything, but it is better than nothing. If you want extra security, you can put in like a wire at the top so that you can create like a seal at the top, and you can create like a pocket at the bottom if you just like leave a hole and just like sew in the inside seams, or you can leave a part right here. So basically I put this on, I pinch the glasses down. As you can see here, it kind of opens up on the sides. It's not super great, so I think if I were to make them, or if I really made the effort, I would pinch them down here. I prefer this duckbill sort of pattern versus the other like pleated patterns just because I find they fit better. I also find that it uses less fabric overall. With this video, you will see that if I can sew, someone who barely knows how to sew, then you can probably sew this if you have access to a sewing machine. So to start, I guess I'll talk about the fabrics that I'm using. So I'm just using some like synthetic fabrics. I don't actually know what kind of fabrics they are. I'm pretty sure they're not cotton. I got these from an estate sale from a lady who was a quilter. So I had so many really cool designs. So I bought these ahead of time for scrunchies like last summer. And I also got these thread spools off of Facebook Marketplace, I think from a super intense Italian nonna who used to sew a lot. And I also bought these braided elastics from Fabricland last summer when I was making scrunchies. Turns out the materials for scrunchies and face masks are exactly the same. This is the pattern that I'm using. There are two different sizes. There's like a teenage and women one, and then there's a men's one. It really just depends on like how big your nose is and how big your face is. So like I wouldn't really care about like what gender or whatever. So to make these masks, you're going to trace out pattern for the lining fabric, which you'll want kind of like a more plain or like a more comfortable fabric. Double layer those fabrics so that you have two of them cut in one layer. And then you're going to do the same with the main fabric, although I added a little bit of extra to the end of the pattern. Although with the updated pattern from the website that I got it from, I think they added more for the seam allowance or for like wrapping at the end. Once you have those all traced, pin them together and then cut them, and then pin the main fabric sides right sides in. This is what it should look like when you have them all cut. So the main fabric is a little bit longer at the end than the liner fabric. Since my liner fabric is just one solid color, I didn't bother flipping it right side in or inside out because it's the same either way. So now we're doing my favorite part, which is loading the bobbin. I have never been that good at sewing. I had my friend Jenna show me how to kind of navigate and how to use my sewing machine when I was making scrunchies last summer. So she showed me how to load a bobbin. There's like little graphics on top that show you where to put the thread. It depends per machine. So you kind of have to like see the instructions for whatever machine that you have. Most sewing machines are generally the same. Some have like a front loading bobbin and some have like a top loading bobbin or whatever. Once your bobbin is full of the thread that you want, you put it in the bobbin case. You want the thread to be pulling so that the bobbin turns in a clockwise direction, and you have the thread pull through and up that part of the bobbin case that I showed, and you stick it in. My machine is kind of crappy, so I had to take this apart like 3 or 4 times each time I was sewing. It's very annoying. Again, would not recommend this machine. Now you're going to guide the spool thread through the machine. So you go through the take up, there's like a guide. It depends on your machine, but they're all basically the same sort of mechanism. And then you feed the thread through the eye of the needle, which everyone knows about. Feed that through and behind the presser foot, pull up the bobbin thread, and then you're ready to sew. Honestly, this was such a novel concept to me, and when I first figured this out, this was actually magical. Start off by sewing the middle seam of the liner layer. You're going to backstitch the top and the bottom just to reinforce the stitching, and then you're just going to try and sew along the curve of the duckbill. Once you have finished sewing, again reinforcing the bottom with a backstitch, you're going to snip off the excess thread, and then you're going to snip along the edge of the seam. Since it's a curved edge, when you turn it inside out, you want the fabric to not bunch up, so that's why you snip it so that it doesn't do that. So that's what the liner fabric looks like. This is going to be the part that touches your face. And then you're going to repeat this with the outside layer, which is like the more pretty pattern layer or whatever you want to be facing on the outside. So once those are both sewn, you're going to iron down the seams. This just makes it easier to sew and it just creates like a nicer product in the end. Here's another angle of me ironing just because the fabric is better and the angle is easier to see. Iron that seam down so that when you lay the fabric down, it's flat and it's easier to sew. So once those are both ironed down, you're going to align the two fabrics together, right sides in, and then pin them together so that you can sew along the top and the bottom. I would prioritize making sure that the top edge is aligned properly because the bottom edge is not that huge of a deal if it's not completely aligned. Now sew along the top and the bottom, making sure to reinforce the stitch with reverse stitching because you really want these to hold up, especially with the amount of washing that you're going to be doing with them. Don't be afraid to like lift up the presser foot to sort of readjust the fabric so that you can get the angle properly done. And then you can continue sewing in an easy, simple, but even line. So once you finish sewing the top and the bottom, you're gonna cut off the excess thread and then snip along the sides like you did with the first seam so that when you pull it inside out, you won't have the fabric bunching up again. We'll turn it all out and you'll see the beginning of your mask. It's super cool. This is a part where I also like to iron this down just to make sure it looks really nice and it's like really crisp edges. So if you're ironing them down, it makes it easier to sew. It's not absolutely necessary, but it does really help. At this point, I was sewing down some of the flaps because the fabric was like too thin. It was kind of flapping over. It was really hard for me to like sew them down. Now that I've done this a few times now, I've made like 20 masks. I just skip this step because it's just completely unnecessary. And I just sew the flaps down like this. But because I'm sewing in the elastics, I find that it kind of eliminates the need to do that anyway. And there we go. Now to cut off a little bit of the extra thread and to sew in the elastics. Now I just sewed them in flat. As I said at the beginning of the video, you can also add in darts towards the sides so that the mask will contour to your face a little bit better. I just cut 7-inch elastics and then I sewed them in about like a 1/2 inch each on each side so that when I lay the elastic flat, it's about 4.5 inches of a loop overall. And this is what I have really found helpful. Now I've made this for some people who have thinner faces and I find that for them, I would cut it down to like a 6-inch or 6.5 inch elastic instead of the 7-inch, but it depends on you and you'll figure it out as you go along. And there you have it, face mask. I've gotten a lot better as time has gone along. I've learned how to iron it better. I've learned how to sew better. I've learned how to sew with a better, like a smaller seam allowance. And that's been, you know, good. And I've gotten a little bit better at figuring out like really not great quality sewing machine. If you want to wash these, we wash them in a delicates bag and we just put them through the wash and then put through the dryer in the delicates bag as well. So far, the stitching has held up. I mean, I haven't washed this one yet, but I've washed the other ones that I've had. So far, so good. If you don't have any fabrics, you can cut up like an old bed sheet. That's like the same sort of fabric that this is, like a bed sheet type fabric, and you can cut them up and that's what you can do. I actually have like a duvet cover that I'm going to repurpose or upcycle as face masks because I've started to run out of fabric. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know down below if this is helpful or if you like this kind of thing, or if you have also taken it upon yourself to learn how to sew or learned new, I guess, life skills, because I guess sewing is like a pretty big life skill. Like sewing on a button, that's not easy. Like it is easy if you like know how to do it, but like those kind of small skills are like lost on people. And I feel like I'm seeing a lot of people pick up these like new hobbies or new skills like bread making, sewing, knitting, little things like that that aren't totally necessary to our day-to-day lives, but are pretty helpful and pretty cool in the long run. I hope you guys are all doing well. I hope you guys are staying home and staying safe. So thank you so much for watching and I hope you guys have a delicious day. Bye.